Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of Lakefield Historical Society. I'm glad you could all come. It's wonderful to see such a big audience here, so much interest in history, and we have a great speaker for you tonight. You learn things over time, of course. I know when I was a young man, I was very much going to church at that time. I won't say so much now, but at that time I was going to church quite a bit, and I was worried about my future, finding a wife and living happily, as a lot of people do. So I went to our local minister and I said, how am I ever going to find a wife? These Lakefield girls are, the twist girls, you can't deal with them. And that was Anglican, so you know what I mean. So he said to me, son, he says, don't worry about it. When God created women, he made enough women that for every corner of the earth, there is a woman who will love, honor, and obey you. And all I was thinking at that time was, then why did you make the earth round?
It's a long way for
Yeah, it keeps up with you, I know. So I'd like to introduce Laura, who will do our land acknowledgement and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Michael. I'm Laura Pearce, and I never promised to obey anyone. But I am privileged to be a member of the Lakefield Historical Society Board. And we respectfully acknowledge that Lakefield and the Township of Selwyn are located in the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Bosley, and Georgina Island First Nations. Lakefield Historical Society respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaties First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. And I'm very pleased tonight to introduce our speaker, Dr. Michael Peterman. We're very fortunate to have him as a speaker. He's Professor Emeritus in English Literature at Trent University, but his career has done so much beyond that. His writing is focused on 19th and 20th century Canadian authors, and he's especially known for his works on the correspondence of Susanna Moodie and Catherine Parr Traill, respectively. And I know I'm not the only person here who very much enjoyed his extraordinary book, Sisters in Two Worlds, a visual biography of Susanna Moodie and Catherine Parr Traill. And as I said to Michael when we were organizing this talk, when I landed back in the Kawarthas again in 2018 after being in England for 20 years, I encountered Sisters in Two Worlds for the first time, and it was one of the things that grounded me and brought me home. And I'm just so grateful to you, Michael, for that book. Professor Peterman is quite deservedly a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada and continues to publish for broad audiences through his columns in the Peterborough Examiner. Tonight, Michael's going to explore Catherine Parr Traill's work in botany. We all know that she created herbaria, pressed collections of plants, and they went in many different directions. Some were intended as a sort of women's hobby, some were published, some became watercolors, some were acquired by various institutions, but we've never really thought about them as a group before. And she made several of them across her lifetime, and the final one was made here in Lakefield. So thank you, Michael, for speaking to us tonight about, is a botanist a scientist? What do we call Catherine Parr Traill?
I think I'm plugged in. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Well,
There you go.
I'm here under difficult circumstances. I've got a terrible cold cough, which has now morphed into sneezing. I don't know whether any of you have had this kind of thing. It's a bit of an epidemic, I think. I heard it called. I've heard it called the 100 days cough. But since I began in December, it means I'm really into 200 days of cough. Anyway, I won't cough, I don't think, but the sneezing will probably happen. My nose has been running like a faucet all day. So that's one of my problems. The other problem is that my beloved Toronto Maple Leafs are trying to eliminate Ottawa or move the pendulum along a little bit. So I won't try to keep you too long. I wasn't sure. I mean, Laura has put an interesting emphasis on botany and science and how we think about Catherine Parr Traill. And it's true, if you look at her life as a whole, she shifts from being an English woman and a young writer in England to becoming a major figure in Canada when she immigrated here in 1832. And I've got some stuff to share with you on that regard, but we're going to start with a set of slides that Jim Forster's helped me put together. And are they ready to go, Jim, if I just press this button?
Yep, just press it to the right button.
I'm going to start you with this, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about, by way of trying to define Traill as a scientist or well, I first made the mistake of calling her an amateur. An amateur biologist. And that was objected to quickly by various people, mostly women. I have changed it now to a different thing. I have 2 essays on Traill. One is called Splendid Anachronism. And it was my chance to try to, and this was a phrase from a very well-known historian named Carl Berger. Carl Berger, and he called Traill a splendid anachronism in her botanical work. And then the other one is, and I could actually just be talking about this as an essay. I don't know, do you know this book, Laura? About, I got maybe 5 years ago, I was asked to be part of a conference called Women in Botany in 19th Century Canada. And the result of it is this very heavy tome, very well printed and with all sorts of illustrations. It's called Flora's Field Workers. Flora being the goddess of flowers. And Catherine has a prominent place in this book. So it's been out for a while. It came out in 2000. I'm getting my centuries mixed up here. 2022. And I'll refer to it a little bit. As I say, I could have made my essay that, but I thought it'd be a little more informal. And we'll just look at pictures for a while, and then I'll give you a handout of some of the things that Traill said, wrote about in her first book about Canada called The Backwoods of Canada, where we are right now. Okay. So don't get too mesmerized by that title. I don't think it's a very good one, actually. A botanist is a scientist, so that's really a wrong kind of question. But it does call into question what Catherine Parr Traill is doing has done with her life and her interests. Laura referred to Sisters in Two Worlds, and here's I guess if I stand here, you can hear me okay? I did this with a chap named Hugh Brewster, who really kind of coached me into writing this book. Are we good? Hugh liked to do the signature of putting these little photos of Susanna and Catherine up adjacent to each other, because really it's a story of 2 sisters in 2 worlds. And here we go from Raden Hall, an early drawing of Raden Hall in Suffolk, to a backwoods log cabin of the sort that the Traills actually built in 1833 down on the edge of what is now Lakefield College School. Would have been on the south end of the school, or on the property to the south end. And here's Raden Hall. And it's quite a spectacular place in many ways. I've had the happy fortune of staying there a couple of times with the current owners. And that's not a big pond. It's just that they used, it's really quite a small pond. But the look here is that it's very big. Here we are. Catherine, look at the dates. 1802 to 1899. She lived the entire 19th century. And she lived most of that, 2/3 of that, in Canada. So that's a reason for, and as you see in the photo of her, she has a book in her lap, and it's probably the backwoods of Canada or something like that. There's an early picture of Catherine. There's some dispute about that, but about whether it is Catherine or not. But Jim Forrester and I keep trying to figure out what's going on. But this is actually a color drawing of her with her ringlets and so on. And they had a cousin who would do these pictures of the girls. There were 5 daughters and 2 sons in the Strickland family, and he would paint. The deal was he would come up to Braden Hall for the summer, and he would paint pictures or give drawings of the girls. So this is one of Catherine. When they came to Canada, they came in 1832. They didn't come together. The Moody's and the Trails didn't come together, but they were in close relation. And this is a picture of Coburg as it was thought to be in 1832 when they arrived. And she called it a neatly built and flourishing village. Here we are again. This is a look at corduroy roads and you see the stumps in the fields, the kinds of things that the Stricklands and the Moody's faced when they got here. There's Hugh's signature pictures again. Lake Catchawanook. From the lower one, of course, is a photograph. The upper one is look, and it's interesting. You can see a boat off the point, and there is a house there as well. And I'm not sure whose house that should be, but this is done by a man named Caddy who grew up on the shores of Catchawanook and painted quite a bit of the life. Here's the trails in Douro. Thomas Traill was a retired member of the Royal Fusiliers of Orkney and so on. And that's just a picture of a half-pay officer just landing. I'm not sure when I'll get a chance to talk about Thomas Traill, but he's a really interesting phenomenon. He was blessed with a wife who was extraordinarily resilient and good-tempered, and he himself was not very effective. And it's a very sad sort of thing when you end up with a kind of imbalance of that sort. I think really what he suffered from was terrific depression, and Catherine was a kind of master of dealing with it. What do you do with somebody who becomes totally depressed and can't do anything? Well, she talked Thomas Traill into going for long walks. That's what he liked to do, and he became, in effect, her postman. If she was sending letters to Belleville or Toronto or whatever, he would just walk them there. You needed to do that in those days. Our Indian friends, this is just a little collage that I think the canoe is a little miniature canoe that was sent back to England to the sisters. You see something of life and living for the native peoples. Traill was very, very conscious of them and very conscious of their help. So they're a big part of the story of the backwoods of Canada. The Traills had a nice piece of property just on the south side of the school as it stands now, but they sold it. And I think Thomas Traill probably had ambitions to do certain kinds of things that never worked out. They ended up, after a bad period in which Catherine lost 2 children near birth, they ended up down at Rice Lake at a place called Wolf Tower. The picture down on the edge is George Bridges, the minister, who came to Canada because he read The Backwoods of Canada and thought, I would like to go there. He was in Jamaica at the time. And then you see something, and there's Wolf Tower in the distance in this one particular painting. So 1846, they end up there. The next year they go to Mount Ararat, which is still there, really, at least with new buildings on it. And it was a great place for her to go because of the air, the healthy air. Here's another picture, morning at Mount Ararat. And Traill wrote glowingly about the flora and fauna of the Mount Ararat area. They were only there for 1 or 2 years, whatever. And here's one of her pictures of a high bush cranberry at Mount Ararat. She got very involved with the Rice Lake Plains at that time. And she wrote about them extensively in little essays that we've collected in a book. And she learned a great deal from the native peoples and what they did with those prairies to keep them lively and useful. So now she wrote the one book on Canada. It was amazing that it got published. 1836, he'd only been here for 3.5 years. And suddenly that book came out in England. And it all was because one of the most prominent of the Strickland girls was Agnes Strickland. And she had connections with a number of publishers. And she arranged for it to be published by Charles Knight in London. But she kept writing stories and sketches, and mostly for newspapers and magazines. But then she came up with Canadian Crusoes. Has anyone here read Canadian Crusoes?
Michael, my grandmother was born not far from where they were, and we were told it orally, and I only read it about 20 years ago, but it was told orally to my mother, and so it passed in the oral tradition around to the early settlers in Harwood. It's a wonderful story.
It really is quite something, yes. But these 3 children, well, they're teenagers, who somehow survive for 1.5 years out in the bush. And they meet the 4th person they dated for 2 pairs. They dated another, so they find a native woman, young woman, who joins them, and they pair up. It's quite a lovely story. So the Crusoe myth was one that the Strickland girls loved. It was, how children will attach themselves to a particular story. And so here there was their Canadian Crusoe story. The Canadian Settler's Guide was published in 1855. Many of you have probably seen that paperback of it. And it's a collection of information and recipes and life information for women, basically. And this is one that I did with my colleague Carl Ballstead from McMaster. Forest and Other Gleanings, The Fugitive Writings of Catherine Parr Traill. And this is a really interesting book because it's got all sorts of things that she published in one form or another. And it's very powerful to read. So we jump ahead now. The Traills lived down in the Rice Lake area for about a decade, I guess. They went from Wolf Tower to Mount Ararat to a farm on the edge of the Rice Lake Plains. And there, they were there because Catherine's daughter, Annie, who married Clinton Atwood, were there. And the sad thing is that that farm, which was so important to them, because they got a lot of the family to invest in helping them buy it, so it burned to the ground one night. And a good deal, I guess, of Catherine Parr Traill's writing and her books and her scrapbooks and so on, all those sorts of things were just lost at that point. But Susanna Moody had two daughters, and one of them, Agnes, became, like her mother, quite a talented watercolorist. And so Agnes Fitzgibbon, as she was called, got in touch with her aunt and put together Canadian Wildflowers by Agnes Fitzgibbon with botanical descriptions by C.P. Traill. This is quite a collector's book, because at that point it was early in the days of publishing in Canada. All the other books, Canadian Crusoe's, Backwards of Canada, they've all been published in England. But here, a Canadian book was done, and it was really a book of wildflowers and settings of wildflowers. And Agnes was really something. She could organize these things and make it happen. It was published in 4 different editions. And I would imagine now, if you had one of those books, it would be worth a minimum of $2,000 or $3,000 now. And then came her magnus opus, if you want, called Studies of Plant Life in Canada, 1884, first edition. And then there's the Cambridge University Press edition of 2011. This is a very important book, and it's absolutely crucial if you're talking about Traill as a botanist. Where do we go from here? Oh, Catherine Parr Traill's Flower Press. This was actually sent to her by a woman in England who had connections to her, and it was the kind of thing she used to create these herbariums and scrapbooks and so on. And this is the one at the museum in Peterborough. It's called a herbarium. I would have thought the name that the Traill was most comfortable with was Hortus Secus, that is dried flowers, using the Latin. Not that she was conversant with Latin, but here you see aspects of the book. It's really a scrapbook. I would have, when I went thinking about a herbarium, I thought it might be under glass, but it's not at all. And the trouble with a scrapbook and with glue generally is that things don't last. And there are very few elements of aspects of this book that are intact and clear. This was written with grandmother's appreciative love to dear Willie Traill, Lakefield, 1891. And it's there to be looked at. Willie Traill, does it say Willie? Yeah. Yes, it does. Willie Traill was one of her sons. Willie and Walter were born in 1845, 1846. And as they grew up, they went west with the Hudson's Bay Company and had jobs. Walter kind of went on his own after a while, but Willie stayed with the Hudson's Bay Company. He married a woman named Harriet McKay, who was a native woman. And so their son Willie came to Lakefield in, I think, around 1886 to go to Spear and Sheldrake's school, which is the precedent for Lakefield College School. And he was there, and he lived over on the grounds of the school, and with the Atwoods, same Atwoods we were dealing with earlier, and he would often come over to visit Catherine Parr Traill. This was her gift. I don't know as a kid whether I'd want to receive that kind of thing, even from my grandmother. But it was important to her, and it was one of the things she could do and give. There are two very important people in the making of plant life in Canada. One is Professor John McCowan, the Dominion naturalist. That's a picture from 1912. And then James Fletcher, the Dominion entomologist and botanist, picture from 1880. These two men were in Ottawa. The story goes that Agnes Fitzgibbon, her first husband Fitzgibbon died, Charles Fitzgibbon, and she married a man named Chamberlain, Brown Chamberlain from Ottawa. And she became quite a prominent Ottawa lady. And she was involved in the naturalist club there and so on. And she introduced Catherine to these two figures who really helped her put that book together and provided her with a lot of scientific guidelines that she wouldn't necessarily have had. So we'll hear, I'm going to use a couple of quotes from James Fletcher a little later. We're back in Lakefield now, and here you have pictures of West Ove. Do we know who that is on the...
Catherine seated on the floor.
Catherine seated, and probably Kate, her daughter Kate, who stayed single all her life, but really helped Catherine. And together they made many of these herbariums or scrapbook of flowers. And they lived in that house. I think at the beginning it was a little touch and go because they didn't have much money, but they lived there from 1860 to 1899. Here's the plot, which many of you have seen, or most of you have seen, I think, and a picture that involves the bearded Robertson Davies at the dedication of the historical site in 1958. He was still working with the Examiner at that point. And here on the... Kate actually bought a property on Stony Lake called Minnewawa, and it became a cottage. They would go up there, and Catherine would track out after ferns and so on. She was still tracking down ferns in her 90s. But here you are with her daughter Kate and two granddaughters, and this is a picture just before her death in 1899. And she was very pleased when Canada decided to honor her. It was a strange kind of gift, I must say, by giving her Polycow Island, the north of Lake Catchawanoka, up close to Young's Point. And this is a letter Sanford Fleming sent to her, informing her of the gift. And she was pleased. I don't know how I don't think even now a cottage has been built on Polycow Island, but it was important because it had a native historical story of a chief and his daughter. And this, I think with this picture, we're looking out at Polycow, which is probably in the very middle of the picture. It's very small. Lakefield sisters were honored with a stamp in 2003, and this is Jim's work here.
It was a mock-up that there wasn't a $100 bill in the picture, but I just like the image.
I wondered about that.
It was
Nice one,
proposed.
Jim.
She was on a list, but they went with someone else.
Oh, really?
I found that image and I thought, that's brilliant. She was on the list.
And there's the college named after her.
Counterfeit money overseas.
And there's her grave, which is in Hillside Cemetery. It's quite a big, and a lot of the family are around. Yeah. That's it. Now let's go back to okay. Yeah, so now I guess thank you, Laura. Here comes your handout. It's always nice when you've been to a lecture and you can go home with something.
Are they teaching any of this history in our schools?
No,
Why?
I don't know.
It should be.
I think it's very important, yes. But I don't have anything to do with,
I know.
and so many good things have dropped from sight.
A couple of extras.
Yes. This is important.
Now this is a series of quotes from, I think you can track them if any of you have a copy of the Backwoods of Canada. I have my own copy, which is a hardcover version that I was actually the editor of as part of the Center for the Editing of Canadian Texts. So, my colleague Carl Ballstead did the one on Ruffy in the Bush. And I mentioned the fugitive writings of Traill. I should just, likely we'll just pass that around. Okay, so let's just look at this and it's interesting. I wanted to go back to the Back of Canada to see what she had to say about coming to Canada, because this is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a book she wrote three and a half years after she got here. And those were pretty difficult years. They were living with other people often before their place was built. But here, just in this set of quotes, you have a wonderful sense of how she was already committing herself to the study of plants in Canada. So this is 1836. The first one comes from letter 2 in the Brig Laurel. It's interesting, you would take her quite literally there, but truth is, she didn't come over on the Brig Laurel. She came over on a brig named something else, but she liked the name Laurel. And so she changed. It is fortunate for me that my love of natural history enables me to draw amusement from objects that are deemed by many unworthy of attention. To me, they present an inexhaustible fund of interest. The weed that grows in my path or the fly that flutters about me are subjects for reflection, admiration, and delight. That's a really nice set of things. And it gives you a sense of who Catherine Parr Traill is. She looked upon the natural world as a variety of subjects for reflection, admiration, and delight. I would also call your attention there to my love of natural history, because this is really where she's coming from. I left her. I think I have, I thought I pulled it out, but maybe I didn't. Growing up in Suffolk, she was influenced by a number of people who wrote natural history. And natural history is a way of thinking about things that is aligned with God. So she sees the Creator as at work on things. And one of the books that was very important to her was called The Natural History of Selborne, by Gilbert White. And I'll maybe have occasion to mention that a little more. But the fact is, she was a very deliberate natural historian, not a scientist, not a botanist. Well, I'm sorry, a natural historian can be a scientist, but he's not really a botanist. So you end up with this, it's like two worlds, right? The old world of England had people thinking in terms of natural history. The new world in Canada was quickly evolving into an attention to science and materialistic science as opposed to science in terms of the universe. Second, this is now from letter 6, and it's written in Peterborough, September 11th, 1832. They're here, and they're finding places to stay. They spend a lot of time staying with the Stewarts, Thomas Stewart and his wife. I am never weary of strolling about, climbing the hills in every direction to catch some new prospect or gather some new flowers, which, though getting late in the summer, are still abundant. Right away she's looking that way. And then she writes a little on the same page, actually. These are little paragraphs, by the way. I consider this country I consider this country opens a wide and fruitful field to the inquiries of the botanist. I now deeply regret that I did not benefit by the frequent offers Eliza made to me of prosecuting a study which I once thought dry, but now regard as highly interesting and the fertile source of mental enjoyment, especially to those who, living in the bush, must necessarily be shut out from the pleasures of a large circle of friends and the varieties that a town or village offer. So now the sisterhood, the Strickland sisterhood. It begins with Eliza, who's the oldest, and she had already, when Catherine left, she had gone on off to work in London and to work editorially. Then there's Agnes, and Agnes and Eliza become the co-authors of the lives of the Queens of England and the lives of the Queens of Scotland, and a whole series of books. They were kind of royalist historians, histories, and they were kind of biased, but they were there. They did the work. So Eliza, who always liked to stay in the background, is here regarded by Catherine as somebody who really could have taught her a lot. The next one, I shall very soon begin to collect a hortus siccus for Eliza, with a description of the plants, their growth and qualities. Any striking particulars respecting them, I shall make notes of and tell her that she may depend on my sending my specimens, with seeds of such as I can collect at some fitting opportunity. So, now she's making up ground and trying to pander a bit to Eliza. This is a charming piece from letter 9. It's called Lake House. It's April 18, 1933. And Lake House would be the house that the Traills built for themselves on the shores of Lake Catchment, right down by the Lakefield College School. Never seen, that's the only place she ever refers to it as Lake House. I suppose our scientific botanists in Britain would consider me very impertinent in bestowing names on the flowers and plants I meet within these wild woods. I can only say, I'm glad to discover the Canadian or even the Indian names if I can, and where they fail, I consider myself free to become their floral godmother and give them names of my own choosing. So there's a kind of a liberation going on here. She's freed in a way to take what information she can gather. She had written books about natural history previously, but they tended to be more attentive to birds and animals than to flowers. So this is a kind of a shifting ground for her. And I love that image of Traill as a floral godmother. She lives up to it very, very well. Letter 14 now, July 13th, 1834. These are letters home, by the way, to family members. Letters that make up the backwoods of Canada. Deeply do I now regret having so idly neglected your kind offer. This is a letter to Eliza, in fact, while at home, of instructing flower painting. You often told me the time would come when I should have cause to regret neglecting the golden opportunity before me. flower painting. She didn't really do much painting. I think what she's referring to there is description of flowers, floral descriptions. Susanna was the painter, and she passed that skill on to her daughter Agnes, and that became very important in Traill's life. Again, this is in the letter to Eliza. You proved a true prophetess, for I daily lament that I cannot make faithful representations of the flowers of my adopted country, or understand as you would do their botanical arrangement. With some I have made myself acquainted, but have hardly confidence in my scanty stock of knowledge to venture on scientific descriptions, when I feel conscious that a blunder would be easily detected and expose me to ridicule and contempt for an assumption of knowledge that I did not possess. The only botanical work I have in my command is Pursh's North American Flora, from which I have obtained some information, but must confess it is tiresome blundering out Latin descriptions to one who knows nothing of Latin beyond what she derives through a knowledge of Italian. So there's the problem. So some of that early information is in Latinate texts and not very helpful. And then finally, this one little thing that she did, another thing that's quite important, I think. I have promised to collect some of the most singular of our native flowers for one of the professors of botany in the Edinburgh University. I've never seen any correspondence that suggests she followed up on that, but she thought it was one of those things that she might do. So there you have a glimpse of Catherine, still very young in Canada, Canadian terms. Now, with this book that I wrote, we call it the chapter on Traill that I wrote for Flora's field workers, I was joined with a lot of other people, and this is from a review from University of Chicago Press. Flora's Field Workers is an ambitious collection of new scholarship on women's botanical labor in 19th century Canada. Excitingly interdisciplinary and broadly accessible, this new volume is a significant contribution to the study. Now here you go, this is contemporary academia speaking here. The study of gender, identity, and class in early histories of women and science. So what Anne Steer did as the editor was put these essays together and work. I've never been worked on so hard by an editor as I was in trying to get what she wanted for this book, because I was inevitably wanting to tell Traill's story as opposed to her botanical treatments. So I promised you. So how am I doing? Okay, Laura? Mm-hmm. I promised you. A couple of, I know this. I think the important thing here is try the Catherine Parr Traill, 67 years in Canada, slowly working together this material that would become plant life, studies of plant life in Canada, working away on it bit by bit by bit, and then losing some of it, of course, with the fire, but nevertheless carrying on. I thought I had two quotes from Fletcher. So this is an outstanding botanist in Ottawa, and he's helping Catherine Parr Traill put her book into shape. And she writes back, she often writes to him saying, I don't know that I'm up to this. But he writes, I am charmed with your style and find it so attractive after the irreverent materialistic philosophy falsely so called in too many of our modern naturalists. It is very charming to me to see such love for our beneficent creation and reverence for his perfect works. In all my instructions in botany, I have always endeavored to draw attention to the marvelous and beautiful adaptations of all objects presented to us in the study of nature, to their required ends, and to show how much we have in this lovely world to make us happy. I think it makes me think of Traill being made happy by the study of plants. There was a lot in her life that was not particularly happy, and she always kept a very positive view, and I think the study of the flowers helped. Now this comes in July 1894, and it's another quote from Fletcher. With regard to your disclaiming the title of botanist, all I can say is that I wish a fraction of 1% of my students of plants who call themselves botanists could use their eyes half as well as you have done. I think indeed your work of describing all the wild plants in your book so accurately that each one could have the name applied to it without doubt is one of the greatest botanical triumphs which anyone could achieve, and one which I have frequently spoken of to illustrate how one can develop their powers of observation. So he's giving her credit then for being so very observant and for seeing plants in God's garden, as you might put it. She often saw herself as writing biographies of plants as opposed to scientific descriptions. And she had that sense of turning it into a more positive view. Well, I would suggest that if you're at all interested, you try to get a copy of Plant Life in Studies of Plant Life in Canada. My copy is in the Trent Archives. You can go and see it there if you want. I didn't get it back out, but it's there. And then there's a paperback edition that you can get. Okay, I think that's yeah, that's good. I should have said at the beginning that I thank you for the opportunity. You know, we get to be an aging professor. People seldom call.
No, I'm glad we did.
You did.
Are you willing to take some questions from the audience?
Sure.
Do we have questions? I'm fascinated by the central circle in the center image, which appears to be entirely made of different mosses. Those are not ferns.
Ferns, mosses, and grasses were really what you...
Yeah, but that one appears to be entirely moss.
Yeah.
And just the detailed level of observation that she was bringing to these creations is astonishing, really.
I think there's work to be done if somebody's really interested in tracking down the surviving herbaria or scrapbook and trying to make sense of it, because this one's not very helpful because there's so many detached representations, and so you've got descriptions but nothing with it. You know, it's kind of a difficult thing to work with. But I'm sure if you put more and more of them together, you might get a better sense of what she was able to do. Yes.
Michael, do you remember the pressed flowers we had in Scott House in the principal's office? Did they get put into the archives? Do you know?
Yeah, I don't know.
Were you the principal? Were you in Scott House?
Yes, I was.
Up on the second floor?
Up on the second floor.
Yeah, they were on the wall there by Judy Stevenson.
I'm not sure where they got to, Elsie.
No, interesting to know. I'm sure they've been well looked after.
They were probably given to the college because of its name.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Michael, because my early people were between where I colored here Gore's Landing, we hiked up Trail Road off the South Rice Lake Road, Trail Road. It's Judge Falter, I think, lived up there first.
I think that's right, yeah.
And then Catherine's house was there that burned down.
It burned down, that's right.
Now, we went into the ruins and found a log that is possibly from that site. I told Jean Cole, who was just passed, bless her soul, about that, and she said that Trent might have a carbon machine to
Well,
date.
they might, the scientists at Trent have all sorts of capacities.
Because I would like to try to get this proved to be part of that home of hers.
That's the third place they lived in. They were there for the longest period of time,
Yes,
until
they
the
loved
fire.
it there. The hills and the valley.
And it was right next to Annie and Clinton Atwood's place.
And where the Canadian Crusoes was, where that was the setting on the plains, the Rice Lake Plains.
Yeah.
Where the indigenous houses burned. Well, who should I contact? At Trent. Would you know who I should contact?
You know what, I hardly even know who's in my department anymore.
Probably the archaeologists. It's the archaeologists who do this whole thing, and they could probably do it with dendrochronology. I don't think they would need to do carbon analysis.
Would I just phone the library?
No, talk to me after.
Department of Archaeology.
Thank you,
Yeah,
thank
so I have some contacts.
you. Very good.
What also fascinates me about this work is that, so pressing flowers was something that nice genteel ladies did in England, right? It was an acceptable kind of hobby.
Yeah.
Catherine, because she's dealing with this depressive husband who doesn't earn a whole lot of money or can't complete his projects that he sets out to complete, they're poor, really poor for
They're
a lot
very
of their
poor,
lives.
yes.
So she's the one scraping a living through their writing, and she finds a side branch of doing these herbaria and then the publications on plants. And she's kind of creeping out from being a nice
Entrepreneur.
a nice middle-class English lady to definitely being an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
Out of necessity, with this facade that she's still a nice little middle-class lady, but they're not, right? I mean, they're really on the edge of genteel poverty.
Well, we didn't do away with Thomas, but he did die in 1859.
Yeah,
And so Traill was on her own. She always wore widow's weeds
yeah.
thereafter. But she was much freer to do what she wanted to do. And when they built the house for her in Lakefield, Sam Strickland, her brother, younger brother, helped to put together the money and the work, the labor that was able to that created that house, which is still there. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you for your lecture. It's fascinating, and I love the quotes. I was wondering if you could comment on the relationship between Sir Sanford Fleming and Catherine Parr Traill, how they met in Lakefield originally in the early part of his life. Do you want anything about that?
Yeah, you have to go back to, well, this is part of the story of Hutchison House in Peterborough. Dr. Hutchison had that house built for him by the Peterborough citizens who wanted to keep a doctor in town. It has kind of reverberations for contemporary times, but anyway, Dr. Hutchison bought that, but his second cousin was Sanford Fleming. And he came over with his brother David, and they actually stayed in Hutchison House for 2 years as he tried to kind of develop connections and jobs and work to do in Canada. So
and this was before he was known as.
oh, he's just a young guy,
Just a
young guy over from Scotland with a kind of propensity for doing engineering work and so on. So I think Traill, Catherine would have been living and would have met Sanford Fleming through Dr. Hutchison, who was her doctor,
But then
and he
later-
delivered a lot of her babies.
Yes. And then later in life, she receives an invitation to a ball in Ottawa by Sir Sandford Fleming,
Yeah,
recalling these early encounters in Lakefield, which I find was a fascinating story.
that's right, yeah. And that has to do with when she's in Ottawa with Agnes Chamberlain now, Agnes Moody Fitzgibbon Chamberlain. She's there and she has a wonderful time, and she is out to a party here and a party there, all because well, partly because of her reputation and partly because of Agnes's connections.
Did Sanford arrange for that pension that she got? Did she in her later years pension?
I'm not sure about that. It's quite possible. He had a lot of influence, and
She was the oldest.
I don't know why you would give an elderly woman an island that isn't big enough to build on, you know.
Well, it was Polly Cow's burial ground.
It was.
It was sacred. And Polly Cow came down from Sick Lake.
Yep.
And Catherine was very connected with the indigenous people. But yes, Polly Cow's bones are supposed to be there. Well,
Is there a marker on the island right now?
I think there is a marker now, but
I think that's.
it was actually given to the Historical Society,
Yes.
the Peterborough Historical Society.
That the Polly Cow Island is sacred.
So it's now part of the waterways, and it controlled as such.
She was the honorary president, right? In 1596.
She was. It's a very funny letter, actually. She is. We're now in 1894, and the Historical Society, just starting up, asked her to come as honorary president, and she does. But when she tells people about it in a letter, she says, "I couldn't hear anything that they were saying, but I smiled a lot, and they seemed to like that." Yes.
When I was at Blenheim Palace, I went into the library and saw the complete set of Agnes Gibbon's books about
Agnes Strickland.
Agnes Strickland about the kings and queens, and I said to the guide, "I know that family. I'm from Lakefield." So I had to explain, our history here. And I knew the situation between Agnes not wanting to be acknowledged in wasn't it the backwoods of Canada book?
The dedication to her.
Well, Agnes really helped Catherine. I mean, it wouldn't have the Backwoods of Canada wouldn't have been published without Agnes's help. Agnes really got upset with Susanna Moody, the other sister here, when she wrote "Roughing in the Bush,"
Yeah.
because to her it was all about a bunch of low-life people who the family wanted to have nothing to do with. So it was Agnes wrote almost monthly to Susanna and John Moody until that happened. They never heard from her again. Class in the backwoods. Yes.
Sam Strickland wrote his 27 years in Canada West in England when he was over picking up his third wife.
That's right.
And is there some speculation that Agnes helped him write that book?
I think there's no question about the fact that Agnes said to Sam, "Sit down and write this book. We need something to answer for Roughing in the Bush."
Mm-hmm.
So that's what.
So
that's
there'd be
what-
some touches of Agnes.
Yeah, and it's quite a good book in its own way. And he has a lot to say about the life that he had to experience here. But I don't think, I think essentially it was Agnes's anger at Roughing in the Bush that led to that. Agnes was a power lady in England. I mean, she wrote all these books, and there were editions after editions of these books. So the one you saw at Blenheim Palace would be just one instance of publishers were happy to publish these books. Yeah.
Is there another female botanist, I read it somewhere, of Catherine Parr Traill's vintage that is a Canadian woman I don't know why I have it in my head. I read it somewhere from the East Coast.
That would be Isabella Dalhousie.
I can't remember the name, but maybe perhaps it's in your.
Oh, it is, definitely.
Yeah. And she's not as famous as Catherine Parr Traill.
Well, but she was aristocracy though,
Yeah.
and the Trails were not.
Yeah.
They were ambitiously upper middle class, but they were not aristocracy.
Michael, that book, Bill and I, when we saw you were in it, and the wonderful content, it is in the Selwyn Library, Patty.
Oh, is it? Good.
So it is maybe the Newfoundland
okay.
woman you're talking about.
Yeah, okay.
The Newfoundland woman, yes, from England, yes.
It's I don't get very many opportunities to talk about it, but it's an important
It's
book.
an amazing book.
Yeah.
It's top drawer.
Yeah. Beautifully
Because
done.
it's published in, can you still get this book?
Yeah, we can still get it.
Published in
Yeah, McGill Queen's Press would have it.
Okay.
It's a hefty price though. It's probably around $60 or $70.
But we have this great bookstore in
We
town.
do. She can get it for me.
Susan Twist will do it.
I'll get the family discount. Well, maybe, we'll talk about that.
Well, let's bring this part of the evening to a close. I'm sure people are eager to have a look at these books. Can I call on my fellow board member, Jackie will come up and close us off in a good way?
Well, thank you for listening.
Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you tonight, and we just wanted to give you a small thank you for coming. That was wonderful. I'm sure there'd be lots more questions for Michael if we had the time, and I'm sure there'll be people later as we close out, and hopefully everyone will stick around for a few minutes if you want to say anything else, if you want to ask some more questions.
Sure.
I have a couple for you because I actually live in the house of Agnes Fitzgibbons, the illustrator. So I have some questions for you later that I'm interested in chatting about.
Where's Agnes's house?
It's very close to the West Stove.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
2 houses over.
Oh, very good.
Anyway, it's that was great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. We certainly appreciate it, and we'll look forward to, maybe we'll get you here again, right? You never know.
How about Susanna Moody?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
You gotta give her an hour instead.
Susanna Moody deserves something,
Yeah,
right?
I think the
Alright.
story of the sisters is so terrific.
It is, yeah. You've inspired me to reread them. They're all sitting on the shelf.
Well, my good friend Charlotte Gray first did the book on Sisters in the Wilderness, and she got most of the material from me, so we were kind of close. And then when Hugh Brewster wanted to do Sisters in Two Worlds, we went to Charlotte and said, will you write the intro? And she said, oh, for sure. So, yeah.
Nice. I feel like I should run home and get all my books and bring them back.
Well, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So I guess the next thing we have, I need to remind folks that our AGM is the next meeting, which is May 29th. And that will be a fun evening because we're having a speaker that night as well. Michael wanted me to put a little plug in for anyone that would like to would like to join our board. We'd love to have you. There's always spots available. I think, how many spots do we have, Michael? Like, it's
We can
endless.
accommodate 2 additional people.
2 more people, come on. I can tell you, we have the most fun of any board I'm on, which is pretty good, I will say. We do have fun, and we have great speakers, right?
I'm actually on the board of PAL now.
Oh, would you like to be on our board? You
No,
might
no.
have-
My wife has told me that's going too far already. So. Anyway, but like you talk about boards that are fun.
Yeah,
They're really
PAL's fun, yeah, it is.
Many of you know PAL.
Yes. So our AGM is May 29th, and then we are also having a speaker that night. That will be Dave Mowat. He used to be the chief at Alderville First Nation. And he travels all over working with the First Nations in this area. And Dave is going to speak about Williams treaties and pre-Confederation treaties on our May 29th meeting. Pre-Confederation treaties of our area, including Treaty 20 that we all live in here, which is an 1818 treaty, the Rice Lake Treaty. And so Dave will speak about that and other pre-Confederation treaties going down towards Lake Ontario. And I guess now we are ready for the 50-50. You want to pull the, who would like the speaker poll? You pull. Okay.
Is it the number? I gotta put you.
Okay. 6703 211. 211? Somebody's got it. Yeah.
Hey,
There you go.
Bill, you won before, didn't you?
Congratulations, Bill. Thank you so much. That's great. Okay, thank you everyone for coming. Anybody else have any important things they want to say? We're good? Go. Go, Leafs, go.
Go, Leafs,
Yes.
go.
Time to get home.